My name is Geraldine, but folks always called me Jerry, 57 years old, and I have been sitting behind these bars for 3 years, 7 months, and 14 days. For most of my life, I was a legal secretary, a single mom who poured everything into my brilliant son Marcus. Seeing him succeed was my greatest joy. Now I hold a wedding invitation I was never meant to see. My son is getting married, and as I trace the embossed letters of a stranger's name, I remember the night he came to me face pale with panic and asked me to do the unthinkable. He promised me it would be okay. He promised he would be there for me. But promises, I learned, are just words waiting to be broken. Before I share with you the story of that night, the crime I didn't commit, and the silence I kept, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. Please take a second to drop your city and state in the comments below. And if you've ever faced an impossible choice for the sake of family, hit that like button and subscribe. My journey to the truth starts right now. The night Marcus showed up at my apartment, the world felt like it had tipped off its axis. It was past 1 in the morning, a Tuesday. He was supposed to be at a client dinner. Instead, he stood in my doorway, his expensive shirt rumpled, his eyes wide and glassy. He smelled like stale wine and cold sweat. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "I need help. I'm in trouble." He pushed past me, pacing my small living room, his dress shoes making sharp sounds on the laminate floor. The story spilled out in frantic, jagged pieces. A corporate event at a downtown steakhouse. Too many celebratory drinks for a big deal he had closed. Keys in his hand against better judgment. Driving home through a quiet industrial district. A man stepping off the curb under a broken streetlight. A sickening thud that echoed in the car. The panic primal and all-consuming. He said he just froze and drove his mind screaming that his life was over. The car was a company lease. The victim, he said, was alive but badly hurt. If he came forward, he would lose everything. His high-paying analyst job. His fiancée Chloe from a well-connected family who would never tolerate a scandal. The future he had built so carefully, the future I had worked 2 jobs to give him a shot at. "It was an accident, Mom. A horrible accident." He sank to my couch, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking, not with sobs, but with a violent tremor of adrenaline and fear. "But if I go to jail, it's all gone. Everything. My career is over. Chloe will leave. I'll have nothing. I'll be nothing." My heart was a trapped bird in my chest. This was my boy. My Marcus. The child I read to every night after his father David passed from a sudden heart attack when Marcus was only 8. The teenager I worked double shifts to put through tutoring for his SATs, packing his lunches with notes telling him how proud I was. The young man whose college graduation photo was the centerpiece of my mantel, his smile so bright it seemed to light the whole room. I saw him not as the 32-year-old man in a $2,000 suit, but as the little boy who used to climb into my bed after a nightmare, his small body trusting and warm against mine. He looked up, his eyes pleading, red-rimmed and desperate. "You know the system, Mom. From the law office. They'd go easier on you. You have no record. You're a mom. It could be seen as an accident. You were tired, you didn't see." He outlined a plan, his words coming faster now, as if he'd rehearsed them on the drive over. He would say I borrowed the car to run an errand for him to pick up a prescription he forgot. The lack of clear traffic cameras on that stretch worked in our favor. With a good lawyer, he insisted I might get probation, maybe house arrest. Nothing like prison. "It's a white-collar neighborhood," he said, a strange, calculating note entering his voice. "They'll see a middle-aged woman, a secretary, they won't throw the book at you." "Please," he whispered, grabbing my hands. They were so cold, like marble. "You're the only one who can do this. You're the only one I trust. Dad would have done it. After this is over, I'll take care of you. I'll be the son you deserve. I swear on Dad's grave." I thought of David, of the last time I saw him smiling as he left for his morning run, of the promise I made to him in the sterile hospital room, my hand on his still chest, to always protect our son. The weight of that promise, combined with the raw terror on Marcus's face, created a perfect blinding storm in my mind. Logic, caution, the very concept of right and wrong drowned in a flood of maternal fear. In that moment, his survival felt more important than truth, more important than justice. more important than my own life. I heard my own voice, distant and strange, as if someone else were speaking from the far end of a tunnel, say the words that would unravel my world. All right, I'll do it. The following days were a blur of whispered phone calls and manufactured details, a grim pantomime we performed for the coming storm. I met with a lawyer, Catherine Whitlock, a sharp woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor who I hired with the last of my savings and a small loan from my retirement fund. In her sleek office surrounded by mahogany and legal books, I recited the story Marcus and I had crafted. I told her I had taken his car to get milk late that night, drowsy from a long day, and didn't see the man in the crosswalk until it was too late. I panicked. I said my instincts failing me, and I drove home too scared to stop. Kate listened, her pen tapping a steady, unnerving rhythm on her legal pad. She looked at me, really looked at me over the rim of her glasses, her gaze penetrating. "Geraldine," she said finally, her voice low and serious, "is this the truth? The whole truth? Because once we start down this path, once you enter a plea, it is very, very hard to turn back. The system does not like to admit it was wrong." My throat closed. I could feel the heat of shame on my neck. I nodded, unable to meet her steady gaze, fixing my eyes instead on a diploma on her wall. "It was an accident." I repeated the phrase, becoming a hollow mantra, a shield against her unspoken doubt. The first real crack appeared soon after, thin as a hairline fracture in ice. Marcus stopped coming over. His calls became brief, logistical. "Did you talk to the lawyer?" he would ask, his voice tinny on the poor cell connection. "Remember, you were going to the 24-hour market on Elm, not the one on Oak." His voice was all business, the terror from that night replaced by a strained, distant impatience. When I asked, my voice small, if he would come with me to the next meeting with Kate, he sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Mom, I can't. You know I can't. My face has to stay out of this, for the plan to work. My boss can't know I'm involved, Chloe's parents. You understand? It has to look like it's just you." I didn't understand, not really, but I told myself I did. I told myself he was scared that he was handling things from his end, working behind the scenes. He didn't come to the arraignment. I stood alone before the judge, a small woman in a borrowed blazer that hung loose on my shoulders, pleading not guilty. The victim, a man named Ray McAllister, was a construction worker with a fractured spine, internal injuries, and a long road of surgeries ahead. The DA, a man with ambitious eyes smelling blood and an easy conviction, pushed for a quick trial, painting me as a menace. The hearing was a nightmare of clinical language and brutal imagery. The prosecution painted me as a negligent driver, careless with a powerful vehicle, fleeing the scene like a coward. My clean record worked in my favor, but the seriousness of the injuries, the image of a working man's life shattered, worked powerfully against me. Marcus sent a single text that morning: "Thinking of you. Stay strong. Remember the story." I clutched my phone like a talisman, the cold glass a poor substitute for a hand to hold. The sentence, when it came, hit like a physical blow to the solar plexus. 3 to 7 years, state prison, not county jail, not house arrest, actual prison. Kate had argued for leniency, for alternative sentencing, citing my age and spotless history. But the judge, a stern man with a reputation for being tough on DUIs and hit-and-runs, cited the egregious nature of leaving a human being for dead. As the bailiff, his face impassive, led me away in handcuffs, I looked back at the nearly empty gallery. No Marcus, no family, no friends. Just Kate, gathering her papers with a tight expression. My heart didn't just sink. It plunged into a cold, dark place I didn't know existed inside me. The last time I saw him as a free woman was in a stark beige visiting room at the county holding facility, the air smelling of bleach and despair. He looked tired, but well-dressed, in a crisp button-down, as if he'd come from the office. He reached across the scarred table, his hand hovering, not quite touching mine. "Just keep your head down," he said, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding my face. "Do what they say. Be polite. I'll put money in your account for the commissary. I'll visit. I'll write. We'll get through this, and then I'll make it all up to you. I promise." He said the words, but they felt rehearsed lines from a play he was already bored of, a role he was eager to exit. The promise hung between us, thin and insubstantial as a cobweb. The bus ride to the correctional facility was the longest of my life, a rolling metal coffin filled with the low sounds of other women's grief. The processing was a brutal humiliation of fingerprints, fluorescent lights, uniform sizing, and cold directives barked by officers who had seen it all. That first night, lying on a thin plastic-covered bunk in a cell I shared with a hollow-eyed woman named Tracy, listening to the symphony of snores, coughs, and distant shouting that was the soundtrack of this new world, I held onto one fragile thread, the belief that my sacrifice had a purpose. My son was free. His life, his bright future was intact. That had to be enough. It had to be. Prison life is a study in muted colors and loud, inescapable routines. The shades of beige, gray, and institutional green. The blare of the wake-up horn, the shouted counts, the clang of metal doors. I was assigned to work in the library, a quiet haven of worn paper and dust motes dancing in slants of sunlight from high barred windows. It was there, shelving dog-eared romance novels and legal thrillers, that I met Letitia Letty for short. She was in her 60s with a cloud of soft gray hair and eyes that held a deep, weary kindness. She was serving an 18-month stint for forging checks to pay for her grandson's asthma medicine after her daughter lost her insurance. She had a calm, observant presence. She didn't ask many questions, just shared her crossword puzzles, and showed me the unwritten rules of the place, which guards to avoid, which days the food was marginally better, how to get an extra shower. The first month, Marcus called twice. The conversations were short, filled with static, and the distant echo of his life. "How are you holding up?" he'd ask, and before I could form an answer, he'd continue. "Work is crazy, this new merger." Or, "Chloe sends her regards." He never asked for details of my days. He never asked about the other women, the fear, the loneliness. He never said he missed me. The promised letters arrived sporadically, single-page notes on expensive stationery with generic well wishes. "Hope you're well. Stay tough." They were signed Marcus with no love, no mom. The money for the commissary account came once, a small deposit of $50, then stopped. When I asked about it during a call, my voice timid, his tone grew sharp, edged with irritation. "Things are tight right now, Mom. You have no idea the legal bills, the stress on me. You're taken care of in there, aren't you? You have a roof and meals." Letty watched me hang up the payphone, its cord coiled like a sad snake, my hand trembling. She didn't say anything, just handed me a cup of the weak, bitter coffee that passed for currency and comfort. By the third month, the calls and letters ceased altogether. My anxiety, once a buzzing background noise, curdled into a quiet, persistent dread that sat in my stomach like a stone. Had something happened to him? Was he sick? Had the truth come out and he was in trouble? I wrote to Kate, my lawyer, my script neat and desperate on the lined prison paper, asking if she had heard from him, if he was all right. Kate's reply, when it came, was terse and brutally professional. "Your son is well. He has instructed me that all communication regarding your case should go through this office. He is focusing on his personal and professional obligations." The formal language, the phrase, "your son," the cold dismissal in personal obligations, was a knife twist. I was now a case file, not a mother. One afternoon, while I was organizing a donation of old textbooks, Letty sat down beside me at the library's lone study table. Her expression was solemn, her usual gentle smile absent. "Jerry," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got a friend on the outside. A good one. She can look at things. Online." She paused, choosing her words with the care of someone handling broken glass. "Do you want to know, really know what's happening out there in his world?" A cold certainty, the kind that comes when you finally stop hoping, settled in my stomach. I had been living in a void of not knowing. The not knowing was its own torture. I knotted my throat too tight for words. The next week, during a supervised computer lab session for a useless vocational program on data entry, Letty maneuvered us to a terminal in the back corner. Her friend Maria had sent login details to a private social media monitoring account. Nothing illegal, just a tool. With my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I watched as Letty's knotted fingers navigated to Marcus's profile. It wasn't hidden or private. It was wide open for the world to see. And there he was, my son, in high-definition color, at a black-tie charity gala, smiling broadly, his arm possessively around a stunning blonde woman in a silver gown. Not Chloe. A new woman. Caption: celebrating new beginnings and philanthropic wins with the amazing Amanda. Another photo on a sun-drenched beach in Cabo turquoise water behind him, a cocktail in his hand. Blessed, living my best life. Grateful. Then the post that stole the air from my lungs, that made the library spin around me. A professional airbrushed photo of him and this Amanda, her hand delicately placed on his chest, a massive diamond glittering on her finger. She said yes. After the best year of my life, I get to spend forever with my soulmate. Can't wait to build our future together. The date on the engagement post was from 2 weeks after my sentencing hearing. The comments overflowed with congratulations from names I didn't recognize. Power couple. So happy for you, man. Amazing news, she's a keeper. Your future is so bright. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. The man in the photos was radiant, unburdened, triumphant. His smile reached his eyes. There was no shadow of guilt, no trace of the desperate weeping son who had begged for my life on my couch. He had not just moved on. He had launched himself into a brighter, shinier, more luxurious universe and had sealed the airlock firmly behind him. I had become a piece of inconvenient space junk, a fragment of a bad dream floating in the void of his curated past. The sacrifice was not a shared painful secret. It was my solitary burden and his ticket to upgrade. A sound escaped me, a choked gasp that wasn't quite a sob, more like the last air leaving a deflating balloon. Letty quickly closed the browser, her movements smooth and practiced. She put a firm, steadying arm around my shoulders as the sterile room, the rows of books, the guard by the door, all blurred into a watery mess. "He turned his back, sister," she whispered, her voice thick with an empathy that felt like both a salve and a confirmation of my deepest fear. "He sailed on. Now you gotta learn to swim for yourself. You gotta live for you." That night, in the relentless dark of the cell block, the tears finally came. Not the quiet tears of earlier loneliness, but silent, relentless rivers of grief for the son I thought I had, for the years I was losing, for the profound, staggering stupidity of my own boundless love. The pain was so immense, so total, it was almost peaceful. I had hit the absolute unyielding bottom. There was nothing left to fall from, and in that terrible emptiness, a strange new space began to form. The final definitive blow came from an unexpected direction, proving that abandonment has a way of finding every last vulnerability. Catherine Whitlock requested a special legal visit. She sat across from me in the attorney meeting room, her usual composure frayed at the edges, a faint line of worry between her brows. She placed a manila folder on the steel table, but didn't open it. "Geraldine," she began, her voice uncharacteristically gentle, which immediately put me on alert. "I have some difficult news. The landlord for your apartment building has initiated formal eviction proceedings. The rent hasn't been paid in 4 months." I stared at her, uncomprehending. The numbers didn't add up. "But Marcus was handling that. We set up automatic payments from my savings account, the one with the money from David's life insurance. That money was my last financial thread to the outside world, to a life after these walls. He canceled the automatic authorization 3 months ago," Kate said, her voice flat, factual, delivering the news like a surgeon making a clean incision. "Notices were sent to the apartment, which of course you couldn't receive. Your personal effects have been placed in a storage unit, but the rental fees are accruing. If they aren't paid within 30 days, the contents will be auctioned off to satisfy the debt." My home, the small rent-controlled apartment I'd lived in for 20 years. My books, my photo albums, the quilt my grandmother made, David's old wristwatch he wore the day we married. The last physical remnants of my life before these walls of the person I used to be. All of it gone or going. A numb, icy shock spread through my veins, colder than any prison chill. "There's more," Kate continued, shifting in her chair, visibly uncomfortable. "Your first parole hearing is scheduled for 2 months from now. I attempted to contact Marcus to discuss character statements, family support plans, employment prospects for your release, things that are absolutely crucial for the board to see. They need to believe you have a net to catch you. She looked down at her hands folded on the folder. He responded via email. His exact words were, "Please do not contact me again regarding this matter. I have severed all ties with that woman." That woman. The words didn't just hang in the sterile, recycled air. They exploded in it, leaving a silence that rang in my ears. They were not just a rejection. They were an erasure. A final brutal edit to the story of his life. He had surgically removed me from his narrative. I was no longer his mother, the woman who raised him. I was, that woman, a vague, troublesome entity from a closed and shameful chapter to be referred to with clinical detachment. Something inside me, something that had been bending, bowing, cracking for 3 long years, finally snapped. But it wasn't a break into a million helpless pieces. It was a clean, sharp break into a terrifying crystalline clarity. The love, the fear, the hope, the desperate need for his approval, it all burned away in an instant, consumed by a white-hot flame of recognition. The tears were gone, burned up. My voice, when I finally found it, was calm and quieter, steadier than I'd ever heard it. "What happens?" I asked, each word deliberate. "If I withdraw my confession, if I recant my entire plea?" Kate's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Geraldine, that's extremely risky. You were convicted based on that plea. The case is closed. Attempting to appeal now, years later, without new compelling evidence, could be seen as obstruction, as playing games with the court. The parole board could deny you and extend your sentence. You could lose any chance at early release for the foreseeable future." "I don't care about parole." I said the words feeling true and solid as I spoke them. I met her gaze and held it. "I care about the truth. I will not die in here branded a criminal for a crime I did not commit, while the man who actually did it lives out there as some kind of golden boy, a hero getting married and taking beach vacations." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the cold table. "Ray, the victim, how is he?" Kate sighed, a sound of profound weariness, and finally opened the folder. She slid a clipped newspaper article toward me. It was an obituary from the local paper. Ray McAllister had passed away 2 weeks prior due to complications from his injuries, a blood infection, following one of his many surgeries. The charge, which had been aggravated assault causing grievous bodily harm, could now, in light of his death, be considered vehicular manslaughter. I looked from the newsprint, from the smudged photo of a man with a kind, weathered face, to Kate. "New evidence." I stated it was not a question. "It changes the legal landscape," she admitted cautiously, a flicker of professional interest breaking through her concern. "A death elevates everything. But to reopen a case this cold, we need something substantial, something the original investigation missed or overlooked. A witness footage, a forensics error. We need a lever." "Then we find the lever," I said. The decision was made. The quiet, broken woman who accepted her fate was gone. In her place was someone with nothing left to lose and therefore everything to gain. "I am instructing you to file an appeal. I am recanting my entire statement, every word I said to the police and in court. It was all a lie, coerced from me by my son Marcus, who exploited my love and my grief for his father. I will testify to that under oath. And we," I said the "we," feeling like a lifeline I was throwing to myself, "are going to prove it." The transformation was internal. First, a seismic shift in my spirit that then directed my every action. I became the most diligent student of my own tragic case. In the prison library, using the limited privileges my clean conduct record afforded me, I requested law journals, procedural manuals, thick volumes on appellate law and evidence discovery. I wasn't a lawyer, but I had been a legal secretary for 22 years. I knew how to read a statute, how to follow a citation, how to build a timeline. Letty became my indispensable partner, my lookout, my courier, my source of smuggled whispers and moral bolstering. Officer Diana Ruiz, the detective who had originally taken my teary, fabricated statement, had always treated me with a measure of pity I now recognized as a potential crack in the system's armor. She was firm, but never cruel, and she had looked at me with something akin to sadness when I'd given my confession. I decided to leverage that. I spent the long, silent hours after lights out, writing not a diary of sorrow, but a forensic timeline. I documented every sensory detail of Marcus's fateful visit, the specific sharp smell of gin on his breath he tried to mask with cinnamon mints, the unusual red clay mud caked on his Italian leather dress shoes, a mud not found anywhere near my apartment complex. I wrote down his frantic offhand mention of washing the car in his building's underground garage at around 3 in the morning, a detail that had seemed irrelevant in my panic, but now glowed with significance. I compiled a log of every stilted phone call, every fragment of a text message saved in my memory, every cold transactional exchange. Then I wrote a long, detailed, and powerfully lucid letter to Officer Ruiz. I didn't beg. I didn't make emotional appeals. I stated facts. I outlined the sequence of my coerced confession and my son's subsequent total abandonment. I politely but pointedly directed her attention to the timeline of garage activity at Marcus's upscale The Meridian apartment complex the night of the incident, a detail the initial seemingly closed and shut investigation had apparently glossed over. I sealed it not with a plea for mercy, but with a request for justice, not for me, but for Ray McAllister. Letty had a cousin on the outside, Maria, a quiet woman with a clean record who worked as a pharmacy technician. Maria became our remote eyes and ears. She couldn't access police files, but she could observe. She confirmed Marcus still lived in the Meridian. She noted the make and model of his new, even more expensive German sedan. She took discreet photos of the building's entrance, the garage ramp. It was passive legal reconnaissance, but it made the outside world feel tangible, a puzzle we were slowly piecing together. My official notice of appeal drafted by Kate and citing grounds of ineffective assistance of counsel and newly discovered evidence was filed with the court. The wheels of justice, rusted from disuse on my case, began to groan into motion slower than continental drift. Then the first real break. Officer Ruiz visited. She didn't meet me in the formal attorney room, but in a general visitation booth, a sign this was unofficial off the record. Her expression was carefully neutral, a cop's face. "I got your letter," she said simply, her hands resting on the counter between us. I waited, my breath held. "It was very detailed," she continued, her eyes scanning my face. "Very specific. The bit about the garage at the Meridian. During our initial investigation, we were told by the building manager that the security system for the resident garage levels was down for maintenance that entire week. The DVR was being replaced. He was quite adamant. No footage." "Was he?" I asked, my voice neutral, matching her tone. "I suppose building managers have many responsibilities. Things can be misplaced." Ruiz held my gaze for a long, silent moment. The hum of the visitation room filled the space. "I'm having a colleague re-interview the maintenance staff and put in a formal request to the building's parent company for all system backups and server logs from that period. Standard procedure when new credible information arises in a closed case." She stood to leave, pausing as she pushed her chair in. "For what it's worth, Geraldine, I never thought you fit the profile. Not for that kind of reckless flight. It never sat right." That was all she said. That was all she needed to say. It was everything. The first crack had been acknowledged by the system itself. Weeks later, Kate arrived for a scheduled visit, but her face was alight with a controlled professional excitement. "They found it," she said without preamble, leaning close. "A secondary backup camera the manager forgot about or was told to forget. It was on a different circuit covering the service entrance, but with a wide-angle view of the main garage aisle. The company had the backups after all." She paused, letting the significance sink in. "It shows Marcus's car entering the garage at 2:48 a.m. It shows him getting out. The timestamp aligns perfectly with the estimated window of the hit and run. He's visibly agitated, pacing by the driver's side, running his hands through his hair. Then he walks to a utility closet, retrieves a hose, and begins spraying down the passenger side front quarter panel and wheel well." My breath caught in my throat. The image was so vivid in my mind I could see the water glistening under the fluorescent lights. "And the witness?" I asked, remembering the desolate street corner where Ray was hid, a place no one was supposed to be watching. Kate allowed a small, tight smile. "Ruiz put out a fresh targeted call for information focusing on that specific intersection between 2:30 and 3:15 a.m. A night shift nurse named Anya, coming home from the hospital, came forward. She was stopped at the red light a block away. She saw a dark sedan speed away from the curb with a squeal of tires. She saw a partial plate, the first 3 letters matched the company lease. She described the driver as a male with Marcus's build and hair color alone in the car. She didn't come forward before because she was exhausted after a double shift, thought she might have misremembered in the dark, and frankly didn't want the hassle of court appearances. The pieces once scattered and buried were now clicking into a damning, undeniable mosaic. The coerced confession, the abandoned mother, the hidden camera footage placing him at the scene engaged in evidence tampering, the corroborating eyewitness who had been too tired to come forward before, the financial and social motive of a son protecting his lucrative future and social standing. It was no longer my desperate word against the world. It was a body of evidence, cold and hard, stacked against Marcus. The appeal hearing felt like walking into a different dimension, one where the laws of physics that had crushed me for years were suddenly suspended. I wore civilian clothes, a simple blue blouse and black slacks. Kate had brought clothes that felt foreign and light on my body. I sat beside her at the defendant's table, but I no longer felt like a defendant. I felt like a witness for the truth, a translator for a story that had been written in the wrong language. Marcus's chair remained conspicuously powerfully empty. He had been subpoenaed. His lawyer had filed a motion to quash, which was denied. He did not appear, a silence that spoke volumes to the judge. The original prosecutor had moved on. The new one, a younger man with a keen, aggressive demeanor, argued vigorously against reopening the case. He called it a desperate last-ditch ploy by a convicted felon, a manipulation of the court's compassion, and pointed to my admitted guilt and the finality of justice. Then Kate stood to present our motion for post-conviction relief. She called Officer Diana Ruiz. Ruiz, in her crisp uniform, testified with clipped professionalism about the new investigation triggered by information received. She described the recovered footage, the re-interviewed witness, the timeline that placed Marcus at the scene of his own home, actively concealing evidence mere hours after the incident. The video was played on a screen for the judge. Seeing my son's familiar, now loathsome form in that grainy, colorless footage, engaged in that guilty, furtive act of washing away the truth, was surreal and heart-shattering all over again. But now the heartbreak was laced with a fierce, vindictive clarity. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, my legs steady. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And for the first time in a courtroom, I did. I spoke calmly, clearly of the late-night visit, the panic, the emotional manipulation, the extravagant promises. I spoke of my blind, flawed maternal love, and my profound, enduring regret, not for wanting to help my son, but for choosing the disastrously wrong way to do so. I did not cry. I matched my testimony detail for detail to the documented timeline and the physical evidence Kate entered. I admitted my own guilt, not in the hit and run, but in the monumental, catastrophic error of choosing to enable my son's cowardice instead of forcing him to face his own responsibility, an error for which Ray McAllister had ultimately paid with his life. Kate entered into evidence the printouts of Marcus's social media posts, the stark visual proof of the lavish lifestyle lived, while I sat in a cell, the engagement celebration that coincided with my despair. And finally, she entered the cold, damning email to her office. Please do not contact me again regarding this matter. I have severed all ties with that woman. The portrait painted was not of a grieving son supporting his mother through a tragic mistake, but of a calculating, narcissistic man who had used his mother as a disposable shield and then discarded her when she became a liability. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair swept into a severe bun, listened with intense concentration, her eyes missing nothing. The arguments concluded. The silence in the high-ceilinged courtroom was absolute, thick with anticipation. She did not retire to her chambers to deliberate for long. She returned after less than an hour, her face inscrutable. Upon careful review of the new and material evidence presented today, she began, her voice clear and resonant in the wood-paneled room, evidence which directly and convincingly contradicts the factual basis of the original guilty plea and which points unequivocally to a fundamental miscarriage of justice, this court vacates the original conviction. The charges against Geraldine Marie are hereby dismissed with prejudice. She looked directly at me. Ms. Marie, you are free to go. The state expresses its profound regret for your wrongful incarceration. The words didn't wash over me, they baptized me. Dismissed with prejudice, free to go. There was no explosion of joy, no dramatic collapse. Just a vast, trembling, all-encompassing relief, as if a mountain of granite had been lifted from my chest, one crushing stone at a time, leaving me lightheaded and breathless with the new, unfamiliar space. Kate squeezed my shoulder, a hard, affirming grip. As we stood, the judge wasn't finished. She turned her gaze to the now stricken prosecutor. Given the weight and direction of the evidence presented today, this court strongly recommends the district attorney's office immediately review this matter for potential charges against Marcus for vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene of an accident, resulting in death, filing a false police report, and subornation of perjury. It was a formal judicial suggestion that carried the unmistakable weight of an order. News vans like hungry metal insects were clustered outside the courthouse steps. The story, "Mother exonerated after taking fall for son. New evidence points to son's guilt," had the spicy, dramatic flavor local news thrived on. I didn't speak to them. I kept my head down, letting Kate handle the shouted questions with a terse, "No comment at this time. Our focus is on Ms. Marie's recovery." My freedom was not a headline. It was a fragile, newborn thing blinking in the sudden light, and I needed to protect it to learn what it meant all over again. Walking out of the courthouse, the sunlight didn't just feel like a physical touch. It felt like an embrace from a friend I thought I'd lost forever. It was warm and almost overwhelming in its intensity, revealing colors I had forgotten: the deep blue of the sky, the vibrant green of the courthouse lawn, the flash of a red car passing by. No one was there to meet me. I had expected that, and in a strange way I preferred it. This moment was mine alone, unshared, uncomplicated by anyone else's expectations or emotions. Kate drove me to a quiet diner a few miles away, a place with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh coffee. She bought me a burger and fries, a meal I could barely eat. My stomach clenched tight from years of institutional food and nervous tension. The flavors were too strong, too real. We ate in a comfortable, exhausted silence. Later, she drove me to a modest, clean apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. Letty, released a month prior on good behavior, was waiting for me on the sidewalk, her face breaking into a radiant, gap-toothed smile. She had used a small advance from the Victim Compensation Fund Kate had helped initiate to secure the apartment first month's rent and a deposit. It was a studio with one window that looked out onto a small maple tree, a bed, a kitchenette, and a profound, chosen quiet that was so different from the imposed silence of prison. Recovery, I learned quickly, is not a moment of walking through a gate. It's a slow, deliberate, often clumsy crawl back into your own skin. The state eventually offered a settlement for my wrongful imprisonment, a sum that felt both enormous and paltry enough to live simply, cautiously, not lavishly. I accepted it without celebration. It was blood money compensation for stolen years, and I treated it with the sober respect it deserved. I started therapy with a gentle patient woman named Dr. Evans, who helped me untangle the Gordian knot of guilt, toxic love, and betrayal that had bound my heart. The guilt was the hardest part, not just for the lie, but for failing Ray McAllister. My therapist helped me see that while I bore responsibility for my choices, the ultimate responsibility for his death lay with the person behind the wheel who fled. I began volunteering with the local chapter of the Innocence Network, first just stuffing envelopes, then later, as I grew stronger, answering letters from inside. I knew their language, the desperate clarity, the specific details that only the truly innocent or the obsessively guilty know, the crumbling hope. I couldn't work legal miracles, but I could offer a listening ear, a voice that said, "I believe you, keep fighting." About 6 months after my release, a letter came forwarded by Kate's office. The return address was a county detention center. Marcus's handwriting, once neat and disciplined, was now a slanted, angry scrawl. My hands were perfectly steady as I opened it, sitting at my small kitchen table. It was not an apology. It was a furious indictment, a torrent of blame. He wrote of his arrest, his perp walk on the local news, his ruined engagement with Amanda, his termination without cause from his prestigious firm. He blamed me. "You were supposed to be my mother. You were supposed to protect me. That was the deal. Instead, you got selfish. You destroyed me to save your own skin. You're no mother to me. You're a liar and a hypocrite. I hope you're happy with your victory. I hope that money keeps you warm at night." I read it once slowly. Then I read it again, not to absorb the pain, but to confirm the complete absence of the son I once knew. There was no remorse, no concern for the man who died, no acknowledgement of the years I lost. Only a narcissistic wound, furious at being exposed. I felt no anger, only a deep, oceanic sadness for the man he had chosen to become, and a profound grieving pity for the sweet, hopeful boy he had been buried now under layers of entitlement and cowardice. The bond was not just broken, it was incinerated, and the ashes held no warmth, no spark of what once was. I carefully tore the letter into small, unreadable pieces and dropped them into the kitchen trash can on top of coffee grounds and eggshells. Then I took the bag out to the dumpster. It was a small symbolic act, but it felt final. I was done carrying his garbage. I learned that love, real love, does not mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they'll just stand there and complain about the smoke. True protection, the kind that lasts, sometimes means having the courage to step back and let someone feel the full, unsoftened consequence of their actions. That is the only way they have a chance to grow, or as in Marcus's case, to reveal the truth of their character. My sacrifice wasn't noble. It was a tragic, one-sided transaction where I gave everything: my freedom, my reputation, my peace, and received nothing but betrayal in return. And in the end, the only person I could truly save, the only life I could reclaim, was my own. Now I sit by my window, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. The sky is turning the soft watercolor shade of a healing bruise, lavender and peach, before deepening into night. A single bird lands on a branch of the maple tree, tilting its head. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't have a grand plan. I don't know if I will ever see or speak to Marcus again. And for the first time, that thought brings a quiet peace, not a piercing ache. But I know who I am. I am Geraldine. I survived the unthinkable. I told the truth. And I am free. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to cut a toxic thread in the fabric of your family, or redefine a relationship that was poisoning your spirit, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your own thoughts in the comments below. Where do you draw the line between loyalty to family and loyalty to yourself? Your stories, your struggles, help us all feel less alone in these difficult choices. If you found a moment of strength or clarity in my journey, please hit the like button. It lets me know this message mattered, that my pain might have purpose in helping others. And if you want to join me for more conversations about healing, about making hard choices, and about finding peace after profound pain, please hit subscribe and share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening, for your time, and for being part of this community of healing. However you're mending, wherever you are on your path, I wish you peace. I wish you courage, and I wish you the unwavering strength to choose your own freedom every single day.